doing today? It's great to see you. Welcome to the 43rd episode of In the Know, your 25-minute deep dive into the modern employee experience and what we can do to make it better. I'm JD from Exonify, and today's episode is all about trust. You know, trust is at the heart of all great relationships. You know, you always feel better when you trust the people around you and that they have your best interest in mind. But sometimes the person you trust packs up all their stuff, takes your dog, keeps the ring, and is never seen again. Anyway, trust isn't just important in personal relationships. It's also essential at work. Trust is what gets you included in the conversation. It's what gets you invited to the meeting. It gets you added to the project, and it's what gets you the seat at the table. But people don't just give away their trust. You have to earn it, even if you are the expert in the room. This is especially true for L&D professionals because, you know, we may be here to help people do their best work and help our businesses achieve their goals, but we also ask for a lot along the way. You know, we ask for time, we ask for attention, we ask for expertise, and most important of all, we ask for buy-in from everyone that we work with, from the frontline workforce to the C-suite, as we try to architect exceptional learning cultures. So the question becomes, how do we build the trust that we need to make the jump from order takers to strategic business partners? Well, our guest today has the answer. We're going to chat with Dr. Keating, Chief Learning and Development Officer at BDO Canada and author of the new book, The Trusted Learning Advisor. Keith is going to show us how we can all become trusted learning advisors. Plus, a few of our live LinkedIn viewers are going to walk away with a copy of Keith's book. But before we welcome Keith to the show, I want to talk about jobs, specifically jobs in learning and development. Because for the past 2 years, I've been posting curated job lists on LinkedIn. So you can follow the hashtag on LinkedIn, CoolLDJobs, for my daily job postings. And I wasn't the first person to start doing this. I followed the lead of folks like Karen North because I know what tends to happen to learning and development during economic downturns. And I wanted to help out the best I can while showing people there are still opportunities out there, even if things get really hard. And yeah, I haven't had what you would call a typical L&D career. I'm very much an accidental L&D pro. I was an operations manager at AMC Theaters, where I also did all of the HR stuff for the team. And I decided that we needed a more structured way to onboard new staff. So I designed my very first training plan based on my experiences up to that point. And that was 20 years ago. And since then, I've worked in a variety of different L&D roles, but I've never found my next opportunity in quite the same way. You know, I've applied to jobs, I've been promoted into jobs, I've been recruited to jobs, I've created jobs that never existed before, and I've also founded my own side gig. And I know there are people out there struggling to find their next opportunity right now. You know, maybe you're unhappy with your current gig and you need to find something new, or you were unfortunately impacted by a layoff and you need a landing spot, or perhaps you're thinking about a career change and L&D looks like a good fit. Now, I don't have the answer for how to get the perfect job because it's often just as much about luck as it is experience or capability. But I do have a few thoughts based on my untraditional L&D path that might be helpful for people who are trying to find that next gig. So first of all, I want to emphasize that being great at L&D is not about technology. It's about knowing how to solve problems and tell powerful stories that motivate people to change. Because I didn't know much about L&D tech when I first got started. But what I did know was how to craft a story that got people's attention and how to connect that story to the work that they did every day. And sure, I had to speed, learn, captivate to build my first e-learning module, but I became an ID without the technical side of the expertise. So remember, because you're good at software doesn't necessarily mean you're a great, impactful storyteller. I also want to recommend that you talk to the people who are doing the job that you want to do. You know, instead of listening to the thought leaders, find the people who are doing the work for real at the types of companies that you want to work for and reach out on LinkedIn and ask for a quick chat to learn more about what they do and especially how they got there. Because in my experience, most people in L&D are pretty happy to say yes to helping out up here. I also want to stress that there's more than one door into a career in L&D. Specifically, you don't have to be an instructional designer to get started. My first L&D job was as a classroom facilitator at Disney. I had the right mix of operational experience and speaking skills, so it was a good fit for me as I walked through the door. So know what you're good at, match those skills up against the different types of jobs that exist in L&D. And maybe you should start as an instructional designer, but you could step into the field as a systems administrator or a project coordinator, or maybe it's a job training type role. And you may also want to consider working your way into L&D from another area within the organization if you can't get the job that you're looking for right away. Because when I started at Disney, I was an attractions host at Star Tours. I didn't exactly wear that outfit, but my outfit had the same colors, if you've ever been on Star Tours. It took me over a year to earn my way into a management position, and then another year and a half before I found my first L&D role. And it can be difficult to outcompete internal talent for L&D jobs, especially given the fact that a lot of people enter the space without a formal credential or formal educational background. Or if you have limited corporate learning experience, a company may not be willing to take a risk on someone they don't necessarily know. So consider applying your skills in different ways and then charting your path towards an L&D opportunity over time. And finally, I urge everyone to discover their own ways of contributing to the L&D community. I've spent the past 10 years exploring different ways to engage with my global L&D peers. In the beginning, I leaned heavy into Twitter, and then I started a blog, and then I started writing articles and going to conferences and delivering sessions and posting on LinkedIn, and now I do some stuff on YouTube. And I'm always looking for my way to contribute to the conversation. And people out there, they're going to tell you that you need to do certain things to stand out in a crowded marketplace. You need to have this kind of portfolio, or you need to join this Facebook group, or you need to post this many times on LinkedIn every week to get people's attention. And I think you should consider those recommendations, but then you have to decide how you want to contribute, how you make connections, and how you can grow yourself as an L&D professional, because that's how you ultimately stand out and find your place in really any field. So that's just a few thoughts on ideas that have been helpful for me as I've explored new opportunities during my career. And I hope that they're useful to you as well. So be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for curated job postings every day. And I wish you best of luck in finding your next opportunity. But now let's welcome our special ITK guest, Dr. Keith Keating. Keith stands at the forefront of educational innovation as an L&D with an L&D career that spans more than 2 decades. A transformation from a high school dropout to a distinguished doctorate holder from the University of Pennsylvania, Keith's journey is a testament to the transformative power of education. And today, he's a lecturer at Penn, a chief learning and talent officer who partners with leading Fortune 500 companies, and the acclaimed author of the book, The Trusted Learning Advisor. Dr. Keith Keating, you're in the know. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Although I don't know that I feel like I'm in the know. Maybe I want to be in the know, or it feels like I'm on the know with you.
Oh man, now it's already a deep conversation we're having. But let's take it a little even deeper, because I want to talk about since the doctor is in the house, I want to talk about a challenge I've been having, Keith. So for as long as I've been in L&D, when people from outside learning and development ask me what I do, I have a really hard time answering that question, because people don't necessarily seem to get L&D. They may not know accounting principles and what accountants do every day, but they seem to kind of get other professions like accounting in a way that they don't necessarily always get ours. And I know we don't have as much rigor when it comes to certifications or kind of specific degree requirements. And I say, as a person who's never taken a class in this kind of stuff, I've just been doing the work. So it makes me wonder, I'm interested to get your opinion. Is learning and development actually a profession? What do you think?
I think there's 2 parts to that answer. First of all, yes, I think that it is. It's considered a profession for, let me give you some academic reasons. 1, we have a specialized body of knowledge. We have skills. We have practices that could pertain to like ethical standards, like accounting. We have ongoing professional development. We have professional associations, and we can have significant impact on the organizational success. So the answer to your question is, in theory, yes, I think we can be. Ultimately, I think it comes down to each one of us and how we treat it. And I don't think that all of us treat it like a profession. Some do, others don't. So in theory, yes, it's a profession, but it also is how we treat it.
I'm with you. So there are tens of thousands of people around the world that work with learning and development. So most employees out there either work directly with us in job training, or they engage with content that we create. A lot of times they might be required to play with us. So why doesn't it feel like L&D often has the same level of credibility and the same level of trust that other workplace functions may have?
That's a really great question. Let me just check chapter 6. Just kidding. I think that it is because some people haven't developed the credibility yet and the trust. I know for the first 10 years, you talked a few minutes earlier about we all have different kind of paths, and you're an accidental L&D practitioner. I'm an accidental one. I think the majority of the people are probably accidental. I don't know anybody that ever grew up thinking, oh, I want to be an L&D. So for me, the first 10 years, I didn't have that respect. I didn't have the credibility for it. And I didn't treat it like an industry with the respect that it deserves. And so I'm raising my hand to say I'm accountable for that. I'm still doing my penance for that. But there are some other factors at play here for why we're not treated that way. One, everyone mostly has a universal experience with learning. So there's this idea of, I went through school, I sat through a class before, I know what to do. Like, you guys just read content and tell people, and they think that that's their association, their experience with learning. So we've got this universal experience with learning. We've got a lack of visible credentialing. You walk into your doctor's office, and normally on the wall, you see all of their credentials. You're like, oh, wow, look how experienced and credentialed they are. Unless we print out ours, if we have them and carrying them around, a lot of people don't necessarily know that we have those credentials. Then we've got our outcomes and our measurements, and the challenge that can come along with identifying those. We've got the diverse entry path to L&D, like you and I. I think we've got an underestimation of complexity. So long story short, it would be all those answers. And then I would say the last one is the lack of support from leadership in organizations. And ultimately, many people aren't behaving like trusted learning advisors.
So what do you think is holding us back from closing those gaps? So from building that credibility, positioning ourselves, as the experts, and then backing up that conversation so people see that, yes, everyone has an experience with learning. People have different educational backgrounds, but they don't necessarily know what we know, or they don't have the depth of expertise or ability to solve the problems in the same types of ways that we can bring to the table. So what's holding us back from building the credibility and the trust? Is it us? Is it them? Is it something else? Where should we be looking?
Or D, all of the above. I think it's D, all of the above. There are a number of outside influences that determine our success in L&D. For example, where do we sit in the organization? Are we in HR? Are we outside of HR? Are we in the business units? That can have a significant impact on how the organization views us and our credibility. Then there's just how people see us in general, or are we a cost center, an expense, or are we revenue generating? A lot of times it's tough to get the resources that we need to really show and demonstrate our value. Are we aligned in L&D with the big picture goals of our stakeholders, of the business? I talked to a lot of practitioners, and I was one of these. I had my idea of what I thought needed to be done. So I'm kind of running down this path separate from what was actually needed in the business. So that keeps that wall or that barrier up for them seeing our value. Are we keeping up with the pace of change? Business evolves quickly. People are evolving quickly. Technology is evolving quickly, like Gen AI. We should be at the driving force or at the front line of Gen AI. And I still see a lot of practitioners kind of sitting back saying, yeah, I'll kind of figure this out a little bit later. But our role, in my opinion, is to be holistically embedded in the organization, bringing business units together, bringing problems together, trying to solve, even if it's not necessarily an L&D problem. And so we look at Gen AI. I want to be at the forefront and driving those conversations. And I just don't think that we're stepping up to the plate, if you will. Do we have leadership buy-in? And then lastly, I would say culture. Is there a culture that supports learning? A lot of people say, well, we don't have a learning culture. Well, a lack of learning culture is still a learning culture. Potentially, it's just a really bad one. So I think all of those factors are really kind of keeping us at bay. In the nutshell, it's alignment, perception, communication, keeping up with change, proving our impact, getting leadership buy-in, and fostering the right culture.
And I know this isn't necessarily a certainty or a guarantee, but in my experience and in similar conversations I've had with other organizations, my relationship with the organization and my ability to do my job is meaningfully different based on who I report to. So when I've reported to the COO or an operational entity, vice president of park operations, whatever that individual may be, I've had a very different relationship with the organization than I have when I've been aligned into the HR side of the business. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be true of everybody. I think it depends on how the organization is structured, what problems are being prioritized by different departments. But if we had to ask, what's one thing to look directly at in terms of our ability to be more strategic and be more aligned and be just more connected to the pace of an organization, the problems that are really impacting people? For me, I think it starts with looking at where is this function of enablement? I also have a question with the word learning, but where's this kind of idea of performance enablement sitting, and how close to the performance are we really? That's my experience.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the overall struggle. So your initial question was about accounting, accounting or even IT. It is almost a copy-paste situation. Whatever organization you go to, the formulas, the structure, what's happening in there. For us, there's this nebulous universal curiosity and also unknown about, are we learning and development? Are we training? Are we talent development? Do we sit in HR, outside HR, part of the business? Where does the funding come from? There's so many of these outside factors that are contextualized to each individual organization. And that's where I think the real complexity comes in. What I did at GM cannot be replicated at Archwell. What I did at Archwell cannot be replicated at BDO. It's like I have this foundational skills, but I have to stop and figure out where the organization is and how to meet the organization where they are while using the skills underneath. So it's contextualized to every different organization.
That's one of the things I get out of when I mentioned earlier in the show that I curate job postings every day. I've read over the last 2 years, hundreds of learning and development job postings for all different types of positions in different parts of the world. And what's been interesting is how different they are. And how if I post 5 jobs today that are all instructional designer jobs, they are not going to have the same skill requirements and they're not going to have the same responsibilities and priorities. And I think that's where we start to struggle with that question of kind of professional accountability and consistency when it comes to how people interpret the value that we can bring, the capability that we can bring, and the skills that we bring to the conversation. Because saying that you want to be a strategic business partner is one thing, but having the ability to do it is something different. So what would you say are the skills that L&D professionals really need to emphasize in order to be looked at as a trusted advisor by business partners?
You've already hit on the first one, which is strategic thinking. Business acumen. It is so important to take a step back and to learn your business, learn their vocabulary, their language, with that consultative skills. That's what I'm focusing on right now with my L&D team at BDO, but even just everyone at BDO is helping to build up the idea of we're all consultants, we are all advisors, or we have the opportunity to be. So what are those skills? So data-driven decision-making, change management, communication, learning agility, leadership, influencing, building relationships. There's a ton of skills, but at the end of the day, I think the foundation of them is the idea of consultancy, advisory. It really comes back to relationships, communication, building trust.
Yeah, and the one I would definitely add is an ability to connect what we do and what we know to the reality of what people do every day. Because you can sit down based on learning principles and kind of a rigorous understanding of pedagogy and these types of ideas. But if that understanding tactically doesn't match how people do their job every day, it really doesn't matter. And how often do we get to do the perfect thing versus the thing that makes the most sense to try to solve the problem, given the kind of box that we're playing within, as we try to influence people to kind of change the shape and grow that box a bit. So when it comes to skills, we want to help everyone out there improve their skills so they can become trusted learning advisors. So what we're going to do is we're going to give a couple people a copy of your book. So if you want a copy, your very own copy of the Trusted Learning Advisor, and you're watching right now on LinkedIn Live, drop the keyword trust in the LinkedIn chat. We're going to select a random few people after today's show to get a copy of Keith's book, and then we'll reach out to you on LinkedIn later this week. So while I think everyone out there is going to agree with the idea of making the shift from order taker to strategic partner is important, one thing I like to point out is that it's not actually entirely up to us. So one of the things about relationships is it's a two-sided conversation. So what would you say about the stakeholders who maybe don't want people to act from an L&D perspective as consultants and as strategic partners, and they want L&D to play the order taker role and to just get the required training done on time? How should we think about that situation, and can we influence those people to think differently about the value we can provide?
I think the first thing is you've got to respect people where they are, and you have to acknowledge that. I had a coaching call earlier today with somebody, and he explained right off the bat, I'm in this environment, and we're a profit center, and we want to just sell as much as we can, and they don't really care about training. How do I change that? You've already identified the business. This is the actual way the business functions. You can try and influence pieces of that, but are you going to be able to change that model and that mindset? Probably not. So I think it's important to recognize resistance is absolutely part of the game. And, sometimes it feels like it's easier just to acquiesce and give in and maybe just take those orders. But I would say that taking a step back and trying to look at what's the source of the resistance, what's the why, trying to understand kind of that aspect. So there's a couple of key things to think about. One, what's the status of my relationship? Is this a brand new relationship, or is this an existing one? I'm in a new role right now at BDO. I am not pushing back. I am probably saying yes much more now than I would maybe later on, because I've got to build up that credibility. I've got to build up that respect and that trust before I start to drop all of the training bombs on them. A couple other questions. Is this a fire? Does my stakeholder need me to react now? If you think, JD, if your house is on fire, you wouldn't want me to step back and say, well, did you leave the stove on? Let's do a needs analysis. Was it arson? Did you have something plugged in? No, you'd want me to get water and help you put the fire out to minimize the damage. Sometimes our stakeholders need that as well. Is this a check the box exercise? That's a question I will ask them directly. Like, look, do you really just need to get this done because you don't care about it? Worked at this Fortune 500 company. We had this multi-million-dollar rollout, and I'm trying to talk about needs analysis and behavior changes and measuring outcomes, and no one cared. And I was just really frustrated over and over again. Finally, I said, do you care? Is this just a check the box exercise? And they said, get it done. It's a tick the box. We don't care. We're not really trying to change the behavior. Okay, we've got that open communication. We've level set. I know what you need. I'll help you get it done. The last question is, are they an order taker too? And this took me a long time to think about and recognize this, but oftentimes somebody tells somebody, that somebody comes and tells us what this order is, and then we're trying to push back and needs analysis, and we need this, and they're like, no, I'm an order taker too. So is resistance a reality? Absolutely. What can you do about it? Have open communication, try and assess the situation to figure out, is this the time for me to try and change their mind, negotiate, influence, or is this just something I need to get done to build that credibility? Even though I may not like this, I may not agree with this, sometimes we just have to get those things done.
And in these types of situations, influencing people across the organization who have all of these different kind of backgrounds and baggage associated to the role of learning and development, influencing them to think differently and maybe appreciate different types of approaches, it's not going to happen overnight. In my case, it often took years to build that kind of trust. So with a journey that takes time, I know that people out there are kind of itching to say, I want to get started with this transition so I can maximize the impact that I have on the organization, that my team has on the people we support. So what's one thing that you would suggest learning and development professionals can do today to start making this transition to a trusted learning advisor, of course, besides reading your book?
So I just want to clarify, I can only say one.
One.
I have several. Okay. If I just had to pick one off the top of my head, what I would say is spend time conducting qualitative research or empathetic research, if you know design thinking, or if you want me to say it a different way, just talking with your learners, with your business, with your stakeholders to understand them, understand the challenge of the situation that they're in, understand the way that they operate, conduct this qualitative research so then you can distill down all of that data to help you identify and uncover a problem that you may not have known exists. A, you're able to identify a potential problem. B, you're capturing all of this data to truly understand your stakeholders and their business so that then you can look for keywords or key problems and start to share those back to your stakeholders. This was the best way that I've been able to help my stakeholders see me or help evolve past being an order taker to, oh, Keith actually does know my business.
Yeah, agreed. A great place to start. And now we're almost out of time. So we've talked about the book. We talked about a perspective on how L&D pros can become trusted learning advisors. We're even giving away a couple copies of the book. But before we let you go, let's learn a little bit more about Keith, because it's time for the famous ITK lightning round. So Keith, you have 30 seconds to answer each of 5 random questions. Are you ready?
Ready.
Keith, does ketchup belong in a hot dog?
Ketchup, hot dogs are disgusting. No.
Wow. Just going there, aren't you? Let's hear about that.
30 seconds, come on.
Keith, if you could only listen to one song for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Stars Are Blind by Paris Hilton.
Look it up, everybody. Is it better to be smart or is it better to be lucky?
I'm going to say smart, because smart can actually enhance your ability to be lucky.
There you go. Keith, who's your favorite Disney character and why?
Bambi. His mom died. My mom died. He faced a world of challenges, uncertainty. I feel like I faced a world of challenges, uncertainty, and have resilience, and it's a coming-of-age story.
There it is. And finally, Keith, what's the best part of your job?
Helping other people unlock their human potential.
There it is, Keith. Thank you so much for joining us today on ITK. How can people connect with you, follow the work that you're doing, and also, of course, grab a copy of the Trusted Learning Advisor?
LinkedIn is probably the best way.
There it is. And you have a book website too, right there on the bottom of the screen, thetrustedlearningadvisor.com. Be sure to check that out as well. Thanks so much again to Keith Keating for joining us and helping us all become trusted learning advisors. And if you're watching live on LinkedIn, be sure to keep an eye out on your messages, because you may be walking away with a copy of Keith's book. And if you had a good time today, be sure to subscribe to ITK. Head over to exonify.com/ITK to sign up for show announcements and reminders. You can also binge watch all of the past episodes of ITK on the Exonify YouTube channel, or listen to In the Know on your favorite podcast app. Exonify also just dropped our latest microlearning guide. This one's all about applying microlearning to reduce safety incidents, increase compliance, and retain employees in distribution and logistics. So if you want to boost your team's knowledge while keeping the operation moving, head over to exonify.com/distro guide. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new conversation about the ever-changing world of work. We're going to be joined by Lauren Sanders, author of the book Empathy is Not a Weakness, and Other Stories from the Edge. Lauren and I are going to talk about overcoming the challenge of toxic leadership within your organization. So be sure to throw that calendar hold on Wednesday, February 21st at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for an empathy-packed conversation with Lauren Sanders. Until then, I've been JD. Now you're in the know, and always remember to ask yourself the important questions. Like, why should you never trust a marine biologist? I don't know what it is, but something about them always seems a little fishy. I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody. In the Know is produced by Taylor Sater, visual design by Mark Anderson. Additional production support by Risha McCutcheon, Andrea Miller, Malia Bernard, Tung La, Megan Kay, and Sam True. The show is written and hosted by JD Dillon. ITK is an Exonify production. For more information on how Exonify helps frontline workers learn, connect, and get things done, visit exonify.com.